A lot of the content that I see online is incredibly boring and quite frankly puts me to sleep. And it's not just because a lot of it is regurgitated AI slop or anything like that, but I think that people a lot of the time are just posting to meet some sort of quota or posting because they know that it's valuable to be online, but have no idea how to actually show up properly. And so today, what I wanted to talk about is how to avoid the number one sin of being present online and posting content, and that's being boring. A lot of the time, people think the opposite of boring means being interesting. And to be interesting, a lot of people put on this fake persona or they go and do all this crazy stuff to try and get people's attention. And that can work. But the thing is, there's a very big difference between being interesting, which people like Logan Paul and Mr. Beast and others are doing. They're interesting. They have these characters, these personalities, and this content that definitely gets people to pay attention, but doesn't always convert. Unless you're, I guess, at the scale and size of Mr. Beast, then obviously that's a completely different ball game. But for us normal people like you and me, right? The goal isn't to be interesting. The goal isn't to have some sort of persona or to fabricate something to be more interesting than we really are. The goal is actually to be compelling. And that's the opposite of boring. Boring means that you don't care about what it is and it's not interesting or relevant for you, right? Compelling is something that draws you in and keeps you there because it is directly relevant to you. And so most content that I see online makes a couple of these mistakes. And these are the biggest ones that I see most of the time that lead to your content being boring. The first is being overly derivative. It is so easy these days to just scrape a bunch of top performing posts and just copy them word for word or just tweak a couple of things. I saw a big creator that I looked up to just the other day who pretty much word for word stole another person's viral post and posted it and got called out for it. So this kind of stuff is everywhere. And I understand why people do it because there's a lot of value in finding pre-validated content and then sharing it yourself, right? It's better than being in the trenches and experimenting. The problem with being derivative is that it's not really authentically you. It's not really compelling in that way. And so if everyone's trying to be derivative, all of that derivative content is just going to be more and more boring. What's actually compelling is sharing something that only you can share and that only you can create. So being derivative is a huge problem. This one seems really long, but it's actually a pretty simple idea. A lot of the content that's boring is too transactional or informational. We're in the AI age, guys. Anyone can put information on anything out there at any time. The barrier for entry has never been lowered. And so information is never going to be interesting anymore. What is going to be interesting is sharing something that's both relational and transformational, meaning that it's something that deepens trust, it's something that establishes connection, and that establishes a shared sense of value and purpose. Okay, that's the relational element. The transformational is whatever you share can't just be information, it has to be something that can lead to a desirable outcome. That can either be by demonstrating what you've done or showing how someone else can get an outcome that they want. So boring content is just something that's transactional. You're just trying to get something from the other person, and it's informational. It's just information. It's not very useful. There's no context to it. A lot of people I see, especially on LinkedIn, are falling for the informational trap. Next one is no prickly perspective. There is no stakes to what you're posting. There's no personal perspective. There's nothing in there that screams, this is a person who cares about this topic, right? The best performing content always requires you to take a stand on something and to really show why that matters to you so much. If there's nothing in your content that shows why this thing matters to you or why you care about this and why you think this is right over something else, it's never going to stand out. It's never going to resonate. It will always be boring and bland, which is why, again, this derivative content doesn't work because if you're just copying, but you don't actually believe in it, people can feel that and it's never going to work. The last one, and this is very important as well, is it's not directly relevant. A lot of the time, people just post stuff that they're like, oh, I want to talk about this, or I think this is really cool, but your audience doesn't care. And that's a really big mistake because the art, I guess, of showing up online is taking your stories and the things that you're doing, but packaging them in a way that's relevant to your audience. So we need to make sure that when we're showing up and what we're sharing is actually directly relevant by asking, so what? Why does my audience care about this? So these are the four elements of the cardinal sin of being boring. And there's obviously some stylistic elements to this as well. There's how you lay out your posts and all this kind of stuff. But honestly, after having studied, like, at this point, thousands and thousands of posts, those elements are really not as important. There are people popping off right now on lots of different platforms that completely ignore the standard rules of the game. The rules are not as important. What is a lot more important is the stuff that we're going to get into right now, because basically what this side is showing is that there's a huge difference between showing up and saying something and showing up and actually having something to say. And that's what leads to this boring content. Okay. Now, quick disclaimer before we dive into how to be anti-boring. Okay. Your content and your thoughts don't need to be 100% unique or original. Quick disclaimer, no one's thoughts and content is 100% original. Everyone is learning and soaking in information and context and frameworks from everyone around you. The point isn't to always be putting out something that's 100% unique, but it is the point to be putting something out there that you're proud of, that screams, this is me and this is something I care about, and that is relevant to your audience. Okay? That's the goal. So we need to make sure that we have content that is not boring, that is anti-boring. And the way that we go about this, like I said, the opposite of boring is compelling. So how do we make content that is actually compelling? The first thing we need is a distinct point of view. What is it that we're trying to say, and why does this matter to us? So the question I like to ask myself whenever I write something is, what is the big idea? What am I trying to convey, and why does this matter to me? And we'll get into that one a little bit as well. So a point of view, what is it that you're trying to say? The next one is a story. So again, remember we talked about informational. We don't want to just be informational and transactional. We want to put something of ourselves in the post. So a story could be something like, well, what's my experience with this particular thing? You can talk about lead gen on LinkedIn. That's a great topic to talk about if that's what your business is about. But frame it with your story and your experience of, when I started on LinkedIn, I was posting for 6 months and got no leads. But here's what changed and got me to 5 leads a week, right? That is the story. That's the framework or the vehicle of sharing the value that you're trying to share. And by nesting the point, your POV, inside of a story, your content immediately becomes uncopyable because it's based on your lived experience and no one else can have your lived experience. Okay. The next is relevance. And there's two dynamics to this, right? The first is, why is it so important to me? Why do I care about this? Why is this relevant for me? Don't talk about something if you don't care about it. If you lack the energy, don't talk about it. It's a waste of time. The other side of the relevance equation is, why does my audience care about this? Why would they ever read this post? That's the thing that I think we miss about attention, is that we just think if we show up and we post some good content, people are going to start paying attention to us. But that's not how it works. Attention isn't owed to us just because we show up. Attention is something that we have to earn. And the way that we earn that is by making sure that it is relevant to our audience and by doing that consistently. The next one is resonance. And I think this is a really important one because too many people waste time on trying to go viral all the time. And viral isn't the goal. The number of impressions feels good, but it's not the goal either. The goal now is not for big numbers, lots of volume, blah, blah, blah. The goal is resonance. And what resonance means is, can your audience feel something when they read your content? Do they feel when they read it like, oh, I can do something different in my life? Oh, now I have a piece of information that's going to change the game for me or whatever. Or, oh my goodness, I've had this same experience, right? So what really this is about is, what does my reader feel when they look at my content? And what do they feel able to do after consuming my content? And the last one is style. And style is kind of about, can anyone else say this? Or will anyone else say this in the same way that I'm doing? If you could inject some of your own style, your own flair, whatever it is, that's going to make you so much more unique and so much less boring. Because the thing is, everyone on social media right now sounds so similar. They're all using the same hooks. They're all using the same frameworks, all this stuff, right? And it's so boring and generic. Because the thing is, the way to get people's attention is to act like a pattern interrupt and a value engine, right? What I mean by that is that your brain is wired to absolutely disregard anything that is already familiar and that it's been overexposed to. That's why if you live next to a busy train station eventually you won't even notice the sound of the trains coming by anymore because your brain has basically said, we've been exposed to this so often and it is not relevant. I'm going to tune it out. And so if your content sounds the exact same as everyone else's, your brain is going to do the exact same thing, or say your audience's brain is going to do the exact same thing. And so we need to make sure that the way that we show up actually breaks patterns for people because you're showing up in a way and you talk in a way that's authentic to you. Okay. So with all of this in mind, I know that this can feel a little overwhelming. And I just want to remind you that the ultimate secret to compelling content, content that's not boring, is that you don't need to be perfect. Right now, there is an epidemic of overly polished, perfect content. Perfect is not the goal. What is the goal is for it to be personal and for it to be more profound. And not profound in some like deep philosophical fake sense, but profound in a way that is deeply personal to you and deeply relevant and resonant for your target audience. Okay. So the number one sin is to be boring. That is the one thing we want to avoid when showing up online. And it's honestly a lot easier than we think it is. There's a lot that we can do by studying all these viral posts and whatever. But I think that the best way to go about it is really just to look at what do I want to talk about and how do I package that in a way that my audience is going to care about. The more that you can show up in a way that is so authentically your own with your own perspective that you believe in no matter what, a hill you'll die on, a story that relates to it, a way that you can package it that's relevant and resonant, and the way that you convey that in a style that's your own, that's what makes your content compelling. Do this enough over time, and people will develop a relationship with you where they come to look forward to and expect your content because they've seen the quality you put out before and they know, hey, if so and so is going to put content out, I want to tune in. Make sure you stop being boring. Make sure that you involve a little bit of your own flair and become compelling. And that's how you can get the attention of your ideal clients, your ideal customers, and actually be able to build the business that ultimately sets you free.